So I run my own consulting firm, focus on nonprofits. I work for both funders and nonprofits. So I work on both sides. So I think last I checked, I'm up to about $85 million and helping to procure, like give out money, make it rain, Oprah style. And I think, this year I'm up to 5 million to help nonprofits get money. So I work on both sides of the table. So I'm here to talk to you guys about grants because I heard you guys are interested in it. So feel free to ask me any types of questions along the way. But I have a little basically grants 101 session where I'll talk to you about these grants and everything you need to know to just get started and how you might find some grants for yourself. Also decide if this is a good idea for you because grants aren't for everyone. So just to start off. So I'm going to share my screen if that works for everybody. Let me see. Results. Oh, can you give me
Yep,
host control?
I'm working on it. Okay. You are now co-host.
Yes. I can share my screen. Okay. All right. Grants 101. Okay. Can you guys see what I'm seeing?
Yep.
Perfect. So today's agenda, I figured just go through the basics with you. What are grants? Who's eligible for grants? What can be funded by grants? And if grants are a good fit for you, some pros and cons of grants. How do you find these grants? And then some just general grant tips if you find out this is a good idea for you, right? So what are grants? Anybody ever got a grant? Let me know. What's a grant? Who said free money? Definitely not free money. Anybody? I heard lots of you are in college. Anybody get a Pell grant by chance? That's a pretty common grant that you might get if you're in college and financial aid. Yeah, a Pell Grant specifically is money given out by the federal government for a specific reason, right? So people who have like the eligibility for it, financial need, right? It's a gap grant that's given for your cost of college. So, and it's given to individuals, but it's given actually directly to the universities, right? So the grant goes directly to the universities or colleges, and then that covers colleges. So that's a great example. But yes, that they're not free money, but generally speaking, grants, as I like to call them, I wish they were free money, but they're not. They're really investments given out for a particular reason, right? And these investments seek to improve the world in some way, right? So the Pell grants, they want to increase educational attainment for people who are low income, right? So they give out Pell grants for a very specific reason, right? And there are restrictions with Pell grants on what you can use it for and how you can use the money. And you also have to I think you have to enroll for a certain number of credits. So while it's not free money, you do have that's given out for a specific purpose to specific people who meet the eligibility, and also you have to maintain it, right, in some way. So that's just an example of a grant. Is like a Pell Grant. Probably most people are most familiar with those, especially if you're in college or been in college. So the next question is, all right, now that we kind of get a sense of like what grants are. And again, I will say that they are investments because it's very important to remember that grants are not free money. They are really trying to do and change the needle in some way. Funders who give out money can be businesses. They are often government. Government is the biggest funder of grants. There are private foundations made up of people who have a bunch of money or made a bunch of money in their life and decided they want to be philanthropists, and they have private foundations. But regardless of like who's giving out the money, they're giving out a real investment, and instead of having a return on investment back to their bank account, they're expecting a return on investment in the world, right? So some social good in some way. There are all kinds of grants for different types of people, and you might have it for various different types of reasons, right? So a service grant, and I think it's a good way to look at it because instead of grant money, you think about it like if you're on the Shark Tank. If you were on a Shark Tank entrepreneurial thing, instead of asking them, to make a donation to you for your product, you're asking them to make a donation and investment in your self, company, or nonprofit to change the world in some way. So that's why I like to think of grants as investments. So eligibility for grants. So this is probably a thing, especially if you start looking into grants. I would encourage you to make sure before you even bother applying, if you're eligible for a specific grant, because eligibility comes in so many different things, but it will basically if you're invited to apply for this grant at all, right? So there all kinds of grants exist. Individuals can receive grants. They're limited in the availability, but you can get a grant as an individual. You will typically see these as smaller grants and or for a very specific project, right? Fellowships are also a very common way that people give out grants to individuals, and that's normally for increasing talent of some sort. So you might hear like of the MacArthur fellowships or things like that, where they're trying to increase diversity, increase knowledge in something, where they will invest and fund an individual in a fellowship, and they receive a grant for a certain number of months or years. So individuals can definitely get grants. They aren't as common, and they are harder to get. And again, they'll be probably smaller or very specific in what they will be. Nonprofits, most common type of grant are directly for nonprofit organizations. And when I say nonprofit organizations, I mean taxed as a nonprofit organization. So they have been filed as a 501(c) organization. There's other tax codes and things like that, but for the most part, it's almost always 501(c)(3) nonprofits. And these range from thousands of dollars to millions of dollars. Like if we looked at my database right now for grants that I subscribe to a database on grants, you'll see almost 75% of the grants nonprofits are eligible for. I think individuals are eligible for about 20% of those. And then the smallest group is small businesses and businesses in general. It's very hard to find grants for businesses because they're for-profit entities. So there aren't as common, but you will see, particularly now with COVID, I've seen a lot of COVID grants and recovery grants and disaster grants related to that. Or you'll see grants like donation of services like Google Ads, or FedEx has a competition and things like that. So those are kind of grants you'll see for small businesses. So basically anybody is eligible to apply for a grant, right? But the most common types of grants you'll see are for nonprofits, and then individuals you will see as well. You can see those. So now I have an example for you guys. So this is a real grant application. If you look at the bottom, who's eligible for this grant? Pretty much anyone, right? Individuals, groups, organizations, anybody can apply for this grant. So anybody can apply for this grant. It's from the Awesome Foundation is the name of this organization. What about this one? Tax exempt nonprofits, right? And they have to be either in Canada or United States. So if I was in Mexico, I would not be able to apply for this grant. What else? What other requirements that say there's more requirements in here on the eligibility? Okay, Canada, US, and you have to have a budget of less than $250,000. I heard some of these start at that, right? So there's both a geographic limitation. You have to be a nonprofit status, which is like your legal kind of structure of your organization, right? And also have a budget of less than $250,000, which is very common. So you often see grants like this where you'll have eligibility requirements like this, where it'll tell you you have to be a certain size, geographic status, and they also tell you some things that they won't fund, right? So they won't fund research, they won't fund land acquisition, they won't fund anybody who's for profit, individuals, they won't fund conferences. So they give you a list of stuff, even though you might be a nonprofit, but you want to buy some private land, they won't fund that, right? So it's important to make sure you understand the eligibility, because this particular grant is, I think the application is like 500 pages or something. So like this one's a giant federal grant or something like that. So you don't want to waste your time if you're not eligible is kind of the moral of the story. So something to consider just in general when it comes to eligibility, your legal structure. And again, when I talk about legal structure, it's kind of like your tax status, right? So how you file your taxes. So either you file your taxes as an individual, you file your taxes as a not-for-profit, for-profit, things like that. So that's kind of like, and that's important because if you receive the money, that's how they would give the money out as a legal entity. So that's why these are very much kind of like investments, right? So if you received $10,000, they want to make sure it's going to their intended recipient or the eligible people that they want to impact, right? Geographic area. Oftentimes grants are limited to geographics. And in the last example we saw, they were limited to Canada, United States. You'll often see even more hyper-focused ones like city of Miami, or people who live in my neighborhood, or if they anybody attending YBAC meeting today would be eligible, right? So, and the budget, things like that. Past experience is also important. Oftentimes when you come to eligibility, sometimes they'll say past experience of being able to do that kind of work. And then financial requirements, like especially if you get to bigger grants, you'll need audits and tax reports and things like that. So just general things to think about when it comes to grant eligibility. Any questions about this? Nada? All right. So what can you actually fund in these grants, right? So that's really the question. So I kind of came up with like a little screening questionnaire just to kind of help you understand like what can be funded by grants, right? So if you're thinking of an idea or a project, right? Like the number one thing is, will your idea or project improve the world in some way? Will it make it a better place, right? The next thing will be, will it benefit people first, right? And that question's related to not yourself, like, will the idea or project benefit me? No, it will benefit a certain group of people, right, first. And does your idea require cash resources? If you're asking for a grant, you tend to want money. What are you going to use that money for? You're going to need to have to have a real cash resource. So for instance, if I was today's meeting, right, it didn't really cost anything to set up a Zoom meeting, right? Like Molly invited me. I am not charging her any money for this service. I'm just donating and volunteering my time. Today's session didn't cost us any money, right? So there wouldn't be any reason for her to ask for a grant to pay for this session. So things like that. Just make sure, do you need the cash, and what would you use the cash for? Do you feel your idea should be completed by you or your organization and not by another person or organization? Okay, so that's the other thing. Just, do you think it should be completed by you? And again, have a real reason why you would be the best for it to when you're applying, because grants are highly competitive. You want to make sure you're giving yourself a fair shot. So just like I'm not gonna apply for a sneaker making grant against Nike because I have no experience making sneakers or anything. Nike should probably make the sneakers, right? or unless there's a real good reason. Maybe I make sneakers and like my workers or nonprofit like helps people like who have disabilities or whatever make sneakers and entrepreneurial. Maybe there's a real reason why I should be applying for that grant and Nike shouldn't. Just to give yourself a competitive edge, have a good understanding of if you should be completing the project. And then, do you want another organization to invest in the idea? Do you actually want this grant money? Do you actually want somebody else to tell you that they're investing? Just like some things on Shark Tank, you might not be investment ready, nor would you want their investment at their terms, right? So you have to think about that too, because there are other ways to fundraise beyond grants. So do you really want somebody else to invest in your idea or project? Maybe you just want to keep it all to yourself, and that's okay. That might be, right? Do you have the time to seek and write grants? It takes a lot of time to write these grants. It takes a lot of time to research them. Do you have that time? And then the other part is, can your project wait to receive the money? Oftentimes grant money takes 6 months to 2 years to actually receive the money. If, for instance, I needed, I had a project that needs to be completed in the next 2 weeks, I'm probably not going to seek grant funding for it because it wouldn't make any sense. There's no way I could get that grant money in time, right? So if it's like an event in 2 weeks, I'm like, it's a great grant funded event that could be grant funded, but I don't have enough time. I need that money a lot faster. So can you wait 6 months to 2 years? Some federal grants take like 2 years to get money. So there's pros and cons to this. I just want to be realistic with you. Smaller grants can be a lot faster when we start talking millions of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars. I've had $25,000 grants take a whole year before the nonprofit got it. It's crazy. Sometimes it can take a long time. From the time you submit the application to even being like, oh, we're getting the grant, it takes a long time for that money to get your bank account. If you're looking for a grant, think of your idea and things like that. I just give you this little screener to just get a sense of, could you be funded by grants, to give you a good sense of, again, the timing, would it benefit people, the resources, all kinds of stuff, just to get a sense of, if it could be grant funded, right? So Oh, now the question becomes, well, we know a lot more about eligibility. We know what a grant is. Should you, are grants a good fit for you, right? Maybe they're not. Again, there's pros and cons. Pros, you can get quite a bit of money from grants, right? From hundreds of dollars to millions of dollars are available in grants. Once you obtain one grant, your chances of getting other grants increases significantly because you've increased your capacity, whether you're a nonprofit or an organization, things like that increase. And it's a good way to get visibility and credibility for your organization, right? So, or for yourself, right? If you got any sort of grant, it helps you to be like, oh, somebody trusted me with their investment. Now other funders will trust them as well, especially if you can show you've done a good job with that money. You're a good steward of that investment. Cons, super time consuming. You'll need to write pretty lengthy proposals. They'll be long. There'll be short ones, but there will be long ones as well. It is very competitive, especially when the nonprofits are applying. Lots of nonprofits are used to writing grants, and so it can be quite competitive. And again, grant money can take a lot of time before you can even get the money and access it. And there's often strings attached. So Molly, what kind of strings are attached to grants?
Well, reporting is a huge one. The trust is very, very adamant about collecting data to prove that the work that you're doing with that money is making an impact in the community. So that is one of the biggest things that we ask people to do, is a lot of intensive reporting. Well, it could be more intensive, but
yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot. So again, strings attached. So go back to the other question I asked is like, do you really want an investor involved in this? Because they will, just like any investor, they want to know what you did with the money oftentimes, right? All right. So maybe grants aren't for you. I'm going to give you a couple of alternatives just in case. You could just ask for individual donations. You got an idea for something? Just ask people for donations. You don't necessarily have to be a nonprofit to ask somebody for ideas, right? So like I've fundraised and helped people get laptops for kids during the pandemic. They needed some extra laptops. I don't have a nonprofit organization. I just asked because I was going to buy them myself and then take them myself, right? So I can just make that very clear. Just be like, hey, I'm going to collect this money so that we can buy laptops and spend. So my friends and family donated some money so we could buy some laptops, right? Just ask. There's nothing wrong with asking money as long as people are aware that you're not a nonprofit. You can do a Kickstarter campaign, right? Lots of people do Kickstarter campaigns, especially if they're starting off so they have enough money so they can invest in product or service. Or if you want to have, a social impact, you can sell your services. Some people I know who, do tutoring, right? They'll sell their tutoring services and use that money to do other things with it, right? So, and then you can have fundraising events. So all kinds of different ways to fund beyond grants that will money a lot faster. It might not be as big of money. It might be a different type of work, but there are tons of alternatives to grants when it comes to fundraising. Anybody interested in a grant at this point? Yes, I'm seeing some nods, which is good. I haven't lost everybody. All right. So if you are interested in a grant, the question starts becoming, how do you find these grants, right? There often are national databases that you can search for grants all the time. And I'll actually search for you guys. If you have some grant ideas, I have access to these databases and I pay for them. So I'm happy to search and whatever you guys want. So Grant Watch, I'm going to show it to you guys. It looks incredibly ugly, but it's actually my favorite grant database. Grant Station is also a national grant database. If you're in Miami-Dade County, there's a free one that the Miami-Dade County posts every week, and you can subscribe to their email list and you'll get email. They give you all kinds of different grants. It's actually a pretty list. I actually like the Miami-Dade grant list. Be free. I often say you can look in your backyard for grants. So oftentimes the easiest way to get your first grant is to get a local grant, right? So we have some great funders in Miami. We have the Miami Foundation. We have Awesome Foundation, which gives out $1,000 project grants, which if we saw earlier today, they gave them out to anybody. That's the Awesome Foundation. And they have a Miami chapter. The United Way of Miami also gives out grants. And then another resource is Access Helps, and that one's good for finding financial assistance for individuals and businesses, especially right now during the pandemic and things like that. So there's lots of places you can research the grants. But before you start researching, you should kind of know what you're looking for because as you can tell, there's a lot you can get funded, but there might not be a lot you're eligible for. So, but that's kind of my first question is who's applying for the grant, right? So that makes a big difference. Like who is the legal entity that is applying for this grant, okay? So the first thing when you're looking at your grant strategy is to figure out who's doing the actual application. So it'll be like you're literally who is the legal entity. So if I'm applying for a grant, like Anna Dilernia is applying for a grant. I also run a small business. I could apply as my company. My company name is Level Up Impact Group, right? But is Level Up applying or is Anna applying? Because there are completely different eligibilities for individuals applying for grants versus businesses, right? Or I'm a not-for-profit. So one of my friends runs a not-for-profit called the East West Foundation. They're a not-for-profit organization. They are eligible for way more stuff. So we can apply for that. So the first question you should ask is, who's applying for the grant? Okay, really important because you will not know offhand which you're eligible for, and it will reduce your size to see if you're looking at stuff you're already eligible for your legal status. But what do you want to apply for? What would be your grant area? Remember, you have to have some sort of area. If you're like a student, right, and you want to apply for a grant, say to go to college, you would be looking for scholarships, right? Which is pretty similar to grants. You're writing an application, things like that, but the keyword you'd be looking for is like scholarship. If you're a student and you have some sort of project idea to help the community in some way, then you can look for a grant based on that interest area. So when I say interest area, I'm saying kind of broad categories like health, arts, education, environment, senior citizens. Those are kind of broad kind of interest area. And then the next question would be the geographic focus. So if you're in Miami, you might want to look for grants that are in the state of Florida, Miami, things like that, right? So first thing is who's applying for a grant? What is the area of interest? Like I said, arts, education, blah, blah, blah. What's that community good going to look like, right? And then if it has a geographic focus, again, it'll just help you narrow it down. So those are kind of some general things. So I'm going to share with you guys. So I have these couple of resources that I mentioned to you, right? So Grant Watch, Grant Station. So here's Grant Watch. Can you guys see this? Okay.
Yeah.
I did give you a giant asterisk is that this is my favorite website for searching for grants. It's also the ugliest website known to man. I don't know why, but it's terrible. It's a terrible, ugly grant page. I don't know, but it has a lot of really good information. So as you can see, they have it's a database. I do subscribe to this, but I know there's a free version of this. So you can see there's 6,358 grant applications right now accepting. There's over 26,000 in their database, but you can search for all kinds of stuff. So let's do some searching real quick. Somebody give me an interest area they're interested in. Aging, arts, culture, awards, community. Okay. Community and economic development or community services. Which one? Services? Okay, let's try that. All right, services. And who's applying for it? Would it be you, an individual? Do you have a nonprofit or would it be a small business? Nonprofit? Okay, so nonprofit, community services, and then geographic focus, Florida, United States, so international. What do you? All right, Florida for now. All right, cool. We're gonna apply, and I had paid for this so we can look at the deadline. So let's say anything that's due in the next couple months. So between now and May, let's see what we get. All right, so we got 65 results for grants that that nonprofits can apply for community services in Florida, right? So grants for this one, it says research. So then you would just go through and read these grants. This one says $10,000 to nonprofits. Here, let's take a look at this one. Let's see what this grant is for. And this is again a grant database. So you'd have to like read through it. This is a federal grant. This is the National Endowment of the Arts. The grant is the LOI, which means letter of intent. Basically, it's a short version of a grant. And then if you get picked from the short version of the grant, they make you submit a way bigger application. So it's basically if saying, yeah, we think your idea is a good idea or you meet the requirements. It's a way of reducing the burden on people so that they weed them out a little bit easier. But it's still probably, since this is a federal grant, it's probably going to take a lot of work. So $10,000 grant. It looks like this is for something related to the arts. Support small organizations for projects in all artistic disciplines that reach the arts in underserved populations. So there you go. You could apply for $10,000 for if you're a nonprofit. And then again, what does the eligibility say? Who's eligible for this money? Can an individual apply for this money? You can also have additional things. This must be a first-time applicant, et cetera, et cetera. So that's just an example of searching for it. So like I said, the reason why I have you go through these questions first related to your grant strategy is because we could spend all day looking through 6,000 grant applications, or you might want to be like, nope, I'm an individual and I'm interested in community services and it's in Florida, right? So it narrowed it down from 6,000 or so applications to 6,500, right? So it makes it, but you can tell reading this still takes a while. Reading one takes a while. And just making sure, you're eligible and you can apply and you're interested in does take a lot of time. So the more you can narrow it down and hyper focus your strategy, the better off you are. So any questions about kind of applying for these grants? Again, I did put a bunch of resources in here for you. Let me show you the Miami-Dade grants page as well. This, the one I showed you first was called Grant Watch. And this is, again, a national database, which I like. Again, it's ugly, but I do like it. I like the searches because it's a good way to get both private grants, federal grants, state grants. It's a pretty good listing of grants. And not that many people know about Grant Watch. There's another national database called Grant Station. Let me see if you guys see this one, Grant Station.
Okay. Yeah.
Grant Station is the most commonly used grant database I see for nonprofits in Miami. And so that's kind of a problem in my mind because I feel like everybody sees the same list. So that's why I kind of don't like it, is because everybody looks at the same list. That's the only reason I don't like it. And it's a lot cheaper than other ones. So anyway, it's my only problem with Grant Station is that everybody uses it. So I rather go to the path of less resistance. So Grant Station, another resource for you guys. Other one I wanted to show you is a county website, actually. So you go to Miami-Dade County, their grants page. You can search for grants right directly on these. And these are not just county grants. They put all kinds of grants on here. So I like it because it's a helpful way for you to look for grants across everything in their database. Also for businesses, they put business opportunities on here, and for community organizations, they have a lot of different grants on here. So I just like to go here and they update it all the time. And I also like their email. So their email list, and it says their grant mail archives. You can see they get a weekly list of all of their grants that they find and they send them out, because their goal is to, again, get this money out in the community, spread the word about it. So let's look at February. So if you want to look at February, let's see. The last one would be the 18th. So last time they sent this out, I guess and see how it's a list of all the grants. So there's all kinds of grants in here. Miami Foundation Community Grants, Autism Speaks. And this is a free email list that you can just sign up for, and you can apply for these grants, which is nice. Again, I like it because free email, bunch of useful grants. What else we got on here? All right, now the one that might interest you all, and you can totally apply for this, is this one, Awesome Foundation. Awesome Foundation, what they do is they fund $1,000 at a time. And they have a chapter in Miami. So you can apply for a grant. And again, if you look at the FAQs, anybody can apply for this money. Is it an investment, a loan? Nope, no strings attached for this grant, actually. You get $1,000 to support your project. It's pretty cool. So if you apply, and you can apply to the Miami chapter, or you can apply anywhere. So if you look here, they'll see United States, you'll see a Miami chapter. And this grant application is not really long. Just ask your name, your email, your project title, about your project, how you use the money, a little bit about you, because they want to know who's getting the money, and then some other additional files. How will it impact Miami? COVID questions, representation questions. It's a pretty short application. So if you're interested in this one, go for it. They do these every month. They give out $1,000 every month. So if you look there, one good way to do research is to look at your funder and see what they've done in the past. So if you look at the chapters in this case, let's look at Miami and see what they funded in the past, right? So just so you guys know, the way the the Awesome Foundation works is there's a group of people who are on the board of the Awesome Foundation in the chapter. And I think each of them puts in $100 every month, and that money goes towards a $1,000 project every month. And so here's some examples of projects that were funded last month. This one's called Senior Stories. So this person is named Yolande Clark, and this was just funded in February. I think it would be awesome to share a vlog series of stories of some interesting senior citizens who live in my building, the Gibson Plaza. It was ironically named after Thelma Gibson, who was an elderly woman still alive and contributing to her community. One of her building residents is an Olympic medalist. So this is literally what they got funded. They got $1,000 for this very specific project to share stories of people in her building, senior citizens in her building, or his building, I'm not sure. So Awesome Foundation one again every month, and you can apply more than once. So there you go. Any other questions? So I have all these resources. One other one is again, I always try to look at your local funders. United Way also has quite a bit of resources. They are a funder as well, but they also have some really good resources on here, especially with COVID. So it's always worth going through your local funders to get a sense of like what else is available for you. And then there's this other one called accesshelp.org that right now has some COVID related resources for individuals who might need grants for housing expenses or other things like that. So I put all those in here so you guys could take a look. Now, again, before you start searching the world though, really answer those 3 questions. Because again, it's very easy to spend all day looking for grants, but you do want to make sure you kind of focus in. So look for if you're applying as an individual, nonprofit, small business, what's that grant interest area? Again, just some general ones like community services, environment, and then if it has a geographic focus. Some tips I have for you. All right, so you found, say, Awesome Foundation, right? You want to apply for Awesome Foundation. Make sure you read the full application before you apply. Okay, make sure you read the whole thing. So that's one thing for sure. You got to follow all the instructions. If there's a deadline, make sure you're applying before the deadline. Do not wait till the last second. Respond to all parts of the questions, right? So for example, Awesome Foundation doesn't have that many questions. Let's see. Let me show you one. Okay. So if there's a question, I guess these are all pretty simple questions. So sometimes I'll have like a question has 2 questions in it. So make sure you're responding to all the parts of the question, right? Make sure you use, spell check. I like a website called Grammarly. And then if you're asking for, $1,000, make sure you have like a logical request for the money, right? So what are you going to use the money for? Again, is it $1,000 to, I don't know, buy cups? That might be pretty expensive. Cups aren't that expensive, Some party cups, some solo cups might not cost $1,000, right? So make sure you're asking a logical request for the money. And then have somebody else review it before you hit submit. It's always just nice to have somebody else review it for you so you know whatever you're asking for makes sense. Avoid things like acronyms. Nobody knows what YBAC is. Make sure people know, spell it out for them or tell them what it is if it's not common. And, if it's, Miami-Dade County, don't put MDC, nobody knows what that is. Oftentimes it's hard for people to understand acronyms. And then make sure you submit by the deadline. So those are my general grant writing tips for you guys. All right, well, it was lovely being here, and good luck. Again, not grants aren't for everybody, but I hope I was able to help answer some of these questions for you and give you some tips as to whether or not this is a good idea for you or not.
Okay, so I don't know, Robert, if you want to talk a little bit about scholarship writing and stuff like that. Just to touch on that, because I know some people, it sounded like you guys had some questions about maybe something that would be considered a scholarship or like a fellowship grant writing kind of thing for that. So I don't know if you want to touch on that.
Yeah, sure. The good thing about scholarship writing, it's pretty much almost the exact same thing as grant writing. The difference is scholarships are free money. So there's definitely money for scholarships. Every university will have money for scholarships. They have specific teams that fundraise for scholarships, which is what I do at FIU. I specifically work for the foundation, and I look for either organizations or private individuals, alumni, to give back to the university for scholarships for the students. So the good thing about it is that there's always opportunities to be awarded a scholarship. The other part of it is that there's always competition for scholarships. So the whole point when you're writing is to stand out. This is like your chance to shine. So I'm going to give you guys some tips in terms of actually writing the essays and what to kind of look for. Kind of like grants, one of the first things that you guys want to look for is where you're going to look for them. So every university, every college has a financial aid office. They have a financial aid website. Within that website, you're going to find most likely a tab, a page that's going to be about scholarship. If you ever have any questions about that, look at the staff that works in that scholarship office. Those will be your best friends, because those will be the people that will best help direct you guys to what you guys can actually apply for. It's all about eligibility as well. So if you're a student who, maybe you went to a specific high school, you never know if there might be an alumni from that high school who donates money for people to go to college. If you're from Homestead, if you're specifically from the Ghouls, if Black, Hispanic, female, if you're specifically studying STEM, if you're specifically studying business. So there's always these type of eligibilities. That's the best part about a scholarship, that if you think you don't qualify, everyone qualifies for a scholarship. It's just about finding the right scholarship for you to apply for. So you'll have your basic ones like, Bright Futures, the Pell grants and stuff like that they're going to push on you guys, because every university does that. But when you ask that staff, you want to ask specifically for what you're eligible for to apply for, because like I said, there's a ton of scholarships. I can tell you that sometimes I'll have a donor come to me and say, hey, I would love to know who it is that my scholarship was given to. And I'll be like, look, for the fall semester, no one actually applied for that scholarship. And it wasn't that because no one qualified for it. It's just because people weren't aware of it, or they just didn't get enough applications for it. So it wasn't awarded. So guess what? We have to wait till the next semester. And every university will have something like that. So you definitely want to make those people your best friends. In terms of actually writing your essay, I'm going to give you guys some tips. I'm also, other than I just volunteer my time here, but I also volunteer part of the scholarship review board at FIU. So I look at scholarship applications, I look at the essays, and I unfortunately have the job of essays on whether they're not. So again, this is one of those times that you really need to make yourself shine. So I give this little kind of pep talking course to a couple of students every semester, so kind of give you guys some tips in terms of actually writing your essay. So one thing you want to do is give yourself time. Find out your deadlines, and then give yourself to actually write it. You want to create an outline. You want to brainstorm. Stick to that true and tried method. You got an intro, you got a body, you got a conclusion. That's simple. Your intro, that's going to be your hook. I can guarantee you that the first you write in that essay, it's what's going to hook the person to your essay. If you cannot hook them on the first sentence, it's going to be very difficult for that person to pay attention. Same way that if a person talks for more than 5 minutes, If they're not talking about something that you like, you're probably not going to be paying attention. So think of it the same way. When it comes to your body, we don't want large paragraphs. New paragraphs, new ideas. So that's what you kind of want. People like to see a separation when they're reading, most individuals. So if you ramble on a huge paragraph, people are just going to get long-winded and probably not even finish reading that paragraph. They'll probably read half of it and then just go straight to your conclusion, if you even have one at that point. And then for your ending, don't just end your essay. Wrap up in a way that, it kind of feels like you're taking a bow at the end of it. You want to kind of like drop the mic on them. You don't want to just be like, and thank you for this opportunity. Cool. No, you want to wrap everything up into an actual idea that you guys have, or the concept that you're writing about. The other thing to know is get to know what the scholarship is specifically for. So again, make sure that you qualify, do the research on that specific scholarship so you don't deviate in the writing of it. You don't want to, let's say the scholarship is specifically about, let's say you're going to school to study mathematics or STEM. You don't want to kind of deviate the conversation from that subject of you being interested in studying that and saying, I have these type of hardships, or I work here and this is how this job helps me as a student, or this is why. You want to very much like stick to the subject. This also kind of prevents you guys from creating stretches of stuff to connect to your essay. So like, let's say again, I like to use STEM as an example because it's so specific. Let's say I work at, I don't know, let's say McDonald's, and I'm like, McDonald's helps me, and that's why I'm really interested in the STEM field, because when I'm working the cash register, it's almost like the technology, and you're just trying to find ways to connect your story to that essay. It's like the more you know about what they're looking for, the easier it is to write about it. That's why it's very important to plan. So in terms of the actual writing, now that you guys kind of have it like broken down into like how it should be written, the number one thing that I can tell you that turns off someone when they're reading a scholarship essay is your spelling and your grammar. If for some reason there is a misspelled word, you can get away with a misspelled word here and there every now and then, but your grammar, if it's like a run-on sentence, the punctuation is, I can tell you that if you just make so many of those mistakes, it turns off a lot of individuals. So kind of like Anna was talking about using those resources, Grammarly is a great one. That's also the reason why you want to give yourself time to write it out. That's why you also want to get it peer reviewed. Just like Anna said, before you submit anything, have 1, 2, 3 other people read it, just to see if they can catch any grammatical errors that you have. The other part is also knowing the specifications of what they're asking for. So is there a word limit on what they're looking for in the essay? If they ask for 1 page, just because you gave 5 pages doesn't mean that you're going to be a step above everybody else. If they're asking for 1 page, you give them 1 page. If there's a specific format that it needs to be turned in, if they say something like, double spaced, nothing more than 3 paragraphs, what have you, make sure that you adhere to those things as well. So one thing that I kind of like to break it down, and this is very quick, when it comes to your essay, I always say that it should be compiled of 3 things. It's your ethos, your pathos, and your logos. So very quick, your ethos, what is that? That's the way that you establish the credibility of your essay. Make sure to be yourself, make sure to be honest, but you also want to be professional. Give it a personality. You have to sell yourself while being humble, which, sometimes, you want to gas yourself up and everything, and 100% you should. You want to see yourself qualified for it, but stay humble. Don't be like, I'm the best one for this, and you're never going to find anybody above it. No, just, again, stay humble about it. Your pathos, this is the creative part. This is the emotional part. This is where you pull on the emotional strings. This is where you tell your story. You want to appeal to the people's emotions, and you want to paint a story. This is one of those moments where you want to show and not tell somebody something. You want to regardless of the fact that you're writing it. So here's an example that I like to give when it comes to this. Like, instead of saying something like, I dislocated my finger playing soccer. You know what happened, but it's like, you kind of ended there. A more vivid way to write that would be, it was like hearing the bite out of a fortune cookie. In an electric shock, I continued to run as my coach and my team fell silent. Something was obviously very wrong. I just realized I dislocated my finger. You see, so I just literally turned one sentence and I turned it into like this 2-3 short story type of thing. I painted the picture for them, so that captures the person a little bit more. Yeah, I mean, I love fortune cookies too, but that's actually something that happened to me, by the way. So the other part is your logos. This is the other thing to keep in mind. This is the logic behind your essay. This is the way that you're going to convey your point. So if you have facts, you have stats, this is where you're going to use it to support your essay. So let's say, for example, this is specifics. Again, I'm going to use STEM. I'm a female, I'm a minority, and I'm applying for a STEM scholarship. You can always use stats and facts, saying things like, within my high school, I was probably like one of, like, let's say 50 girls who were actually involved within STEM projects inside of our school. Out of those 50 girls, I'm probably one of the 5 that got accepted into a college, or if it's from a specific area, you can look up stats and facts that are going to support what you're trying to say. Again, you want to paint this full picture for the individual, and not just, again, the other thing too is you don't want to just throw facts, but you want to be able to use that to support the picture that you're trying to paint. So out of all that, final points, and these are, again, I can't stress this enough. Be brief, but again, try to paint that picture. So be specific and concise. Don't use a lot of exclamation points. That's something else that I've kind of noticed sometimes. You don't need to seem overly excited about having to apply for something. No one ever is. If you ever apply for a job, a scholarship, or anything, the process is horrible. No one's ever excited about having to apply or write an application. They always ask you the same questions like 20 times. And if you're applying to like 20 different places at the same time, it's always the same application over and over again. No one's excited. So don't overuse your exclamation points. Use them to, express yourself in something that you're very excited about, but keep it to a minimum. The other thing that I've also seen is when it comes to your thank you, most people like to conclude their essays with a thank you, which is not a problem. I would be brief with it. You can definitely show that you're grateful for the opportunity to apply for something and to apply for this money without having to gas somebody up like if it was, you're the end all be all for doing this for me. Like, I super appreciate, like, no, just, thank for the opportunity and go about your way. And again, I cannot stress this enough. Grammar. Please, for the love of God, if you're applying for a scholarship, proofread, reread, and again, give yourself time. I usually say like a 2-week span from when you have to turn in that essay. Start writing it 2 weeks ahead. Give yourself a week to write it, leave it down, go for a walk, leave it for a day or so, come back, read it to yourself, see if there's any errors, see if there's anything you want to change. Then give it to somebody else. Give it to 3 people. Let them read it over, let them tell you what you think, give it back, do some final edits, and you're ready to submit. But definitely give yourself time. And again, definitely just double check everything that you do. When it comes to your scholarships, again, every university, every college is going to have that website for you, the financial aid office. You can usually Google scholarship office, MDC, scholarship office, FIU. Specifically at FIU, if you're looking for something, if you're a student at FIU or even MDC, I have friends that work at both. Feel free to reach out to me, and we can help you get connected with whoever it is that you need to talk to. But you'll see that they'll have a portal for you to apply to. MDC has a portal. They also have on their page, I believe they have something where it's like a featured one. Then they have a number of other ones that different tab that you can see a number of ones that you can also apply for. They have things from Black entrepreneurs. They have the Bright Futures. They have, I think the Manny Bayside Foundation gives a specific scholarship to MDC as well. Then you'll have some that are like specific names. Those are individuals who actually donated to give out a scholarship. So every university will have this, Barry, MDC, all of them. So now if you miss a deadline, great question. If you miss a deadline, there's a number of ways that can, I guess, alleviate that. A lot of universities will have what's called a quote unquote completion or emergency fund that they use for certain items like this. So like, let's say I am in desperate need of a scholarship, but I did miss a deadline. You know, I need a certain number of funds that I need so that I can pay for my classes, my books, what have you. A lot of those offices for different circumstances will have what they call either a student success fund, an emergency aid fund, a completion fund that you can apply for. And this is not without deadlines. Most things will have deadlines, but a lot of times they're kind of operated ad hocly. So on a case-by-case basis, that they'll try to get those funds out of to help you with. I try to say to stick to what those deadlines are. And the only reason being it's because of the actual disbursement of it. So let's say, for example, you know, tuition this semester costs, let's say, $2,500. If I apply to 3 scholarships, let's say each of them is $1,000, and I get all 3, I have an extra $500 now that's quote unquote given to me, and I can use those $500 for whatever I need, whether it be getting around, getting to class, what have you. My tuition's already paid, but now I have $500, you know, that I can use. If, let's say, for example, you miss a deadline, you know, and let's say you only apply to 2 of those scholarships, each for $1,000. That means you have $2,000, but you have $500 that you still have in your balance to have to pay for your classes. If you apply for those completions, they're only going to give you the $500 to complete your classes. That's it. So when you're adhering to those deadlines and you're actually taking the time to apply for scholarships, you really do have the opportunity to get money in your pocket. The whole point of the scholarship system within universities, I can tell you at least at FIU's case, is we don't want our students to be working. So if we can at least pay for your college and you guys get scholarship or private dollars anywhere else, that's money that you guys get to keep. The other thing too that you might want to check, depending if you guys work, a lot of places where that work will give you guys tuition reimbursement. So a great company, for example, down here in Florida, Publix does that for all their employees, regardless of your age. So that's like one of my, I always say, like, even my kid, like growing up, like his first job will probably be at Publix because it's a great organization and, you know, there's a Publix in every corner. So it's a great place to work. They do tuition reimbursement. A lot of employers will do that also, where you can say, you know, let's say and a lot of times, if you got a scholarship, guess what? That's money back in your pocket. So if I paid $2,500 from the scholarship, I'm gonna get it reimbursed from my employer. That's $2,500 for you. You know, so also look into that. Other than just looking at the resources at the university, look at your employer and see if they possibly do that as well. And again, if you have any questions about scholarships, please feel free to reach out to me. Most individuals, especially down here in South Florida, you either get Bright Futures or sometimes you qualify for a Pell grant. That money goes into your bank account. It doesn't go to the university. The times that it does go to university is if for any reason you have certain funds that need to get paid there first, the rest of it gets sent to you. So if I qualify for, let's say a $3,000 Pell grant, if I'm awarded a $3,000 Pell grant this semester, but my classes only cost $2,500, FIU receives $3,000. They pay for the classes. The other $500 gets sent to me. Now those $500, I can use it for whatever I want. So here's another thing too. The reason you want to know those staff members is because they'll tell you the scholarships work. Like, let's say you want, like, let's say a stipend. You know, like, I want to be able to go to school, but I also have bills at home that I got to take care of. And you know what, like, I don't want to work. There's a lot of individuals and endowments that fund those type of scholarships where they'll say, hey, we'll pay for the students. Let's say, like, this is, again, I'll use a $3,000 one. Let's say I want to give out a $3,000 scholarship for one student this entire semester. A lot of people will put in their contracts that not only do I want those dollars to be paid for their classes, but I want the rest of the money, if it's not completely used up, to go to the students so they can use that as a stipend and use it for whatever it is that they need, whether it be more books, whether it be for meals. A lot of times you'll have scholarships that even pay for your housing on campus. So that's why I say, like, things that you think you need to spend, especially at a university or at a college, if there's money that you think you need to spend for something there, there's always a scholarship that will take care of it. Usually there will be a scholarship that will take care of it. And again, you can talk to those staff members and they'll tell you, like, hey, I want to live on campus, you know, or, you know, I don't want to necessarily have to work, or I have to work because, you know, I pay bills at home. So, like, I'm trying to see if there's any way that I can have enough funds to where anything that I do work for, I'm able to pay my bills with, but I want my school to get taken care of and what have you. Like, they'll work with you to be able to find those type of things. Now, in terms of just getting money in your pocket, obviously you just can't flat out say, hey, I want money in my pocket. How can I make it work? There's, like I said, there's always ways that does end up happening. That's why I say a lot of times, like, the Bright Futures, Pell Grants, those are great ones to apply for, because anything that's left over, especially the Pell Grant, if there's anything left over, that's money that they're saying that it's completely just for the student, because what they want you to do is be able to go to college. So as long as that money is being used to pay for college, the rest of it is for you to be able to go to college. So that money does end up in your pocket. Whenever there's an option for grants that you apply for as a student, those are going to be dollars and funds that go straight after your scholarly stuff is paid for, is going to go straight to you in terms of your classes after they're paid for. So as opposed to having this loan that's $5,000 and your classes only cost $2,500, so now you have $2,500 in your bank account, it would only be something like, let's say your classes are $2,800, they lend you $3K, and you have $200 in your bank account. But again, that $200 doesn't have to be paid back. Where the government loan, you definitely are leaving college with that $5K debt. So again, there's ways to do it. Ultimately, what you need to figure out is getting your classes paid for first. That's what your scholarship is going to be for, is getting your classes paid for first. Again, there's also ways, like I mentioned, there'll be scholarships where they'll give you a stipend, so that way you can, you know, your student life, whether it be housing, whether it be food, whether it be, you know, there's a number of things. There's also scholarships that are like that. So I know, for example, I had a friend of mine who, he was on scholarship. He got not only his classes paid for, but he got his housing on college paid for, and he didn't have to pay for a meal as long as he was eating on campus. And that was I forgot what the name of that scholarship was at the time, but yeah, it was, you know, somebody who donated money. He's like, somebody who had a personal connection with the university. They were like, you know, I know what it is to have to work, not have enough money to pay for your food and stuff like that, or, you know, eating dollar McChickens for every meal. So I want to be able to give a scholarship to somebody so they don't have to worry about the meals while they're a student. And he only uses that money for the meals on campus. You know, so scholarships are very specific. They can be very specific. They can be very general, very broad. But that's the kind of way that you can get around in terms of actually getting money in, quote unquote, your pocket. You know, you try to get your scholarship, get your school paid for first. Look at the different things that you need to be taken care of. Again, whether it's housing, whether it's food, even your bills sometimes. After that, again, when you have something like a Pell Grant and it's seen that everything else is getting paid for, that leftover is going to end up in your pocket. And that's pretty much how you kind of maximize what's going into your pocket at that point. Again, there's always scholarships where you can pay for your classes and not have to take money from the government that you have to pay back. The same way that grants come from different funders, there's always different funders when it comes to scholarships. So it doesn't have to be just the government. Our dollars, we have a certain amount of money that the government does give us that we can grant as scholarships. But for the most part, like the foundation where I work at FIU, it's all privately funded. So it could be an individual or it could be a company, and it's all different. So like, you know, Royal Caribbean, Carnival, Toyota, GM, Coca-Cola, you know, and even smaller ones, like a lot of the accounting firms here in South Florida have scholarships at FIU for their business students. You know, a lot of attorneys give money for students that are going into law school. So you can get, at least at a university or a college, it's always funded by something very, very different. It doesn't always have to be a government program that you're getting your money from.
Any other questions for Robert?
If you do, please feel free to reach out. Send me an email.
See ya.